Hola, 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 mi gente. Welcome to another episode of On the Block with Jen. I am YouTube and your favorite devil's advocate and bad girl, Jen. You can reach me on all social media platforms, On the Block with Jen, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. You know the deal. On the Block with Jen at Gmail if you want to contact me for any business whatsoever, collaboration, an interview, what have you. If you want to support the show and help Mama keep the church lights on, hit me at the Cash App right here on the Block with Jen. Also, Cash App. You can buy me a smoothie. Tonight's show is going to be very, very, very informative, and I needed a pro up here because I am not a pro. I just have my opinions like everybody else, right? But I wanted someone that's well versed in this topic. This topic is very, very controversial. Some people are all the way for it. Some people are absolutely anti, and some people are like, hey, if it's in the Bible, it's good with me. So we'll dissect a little bit. Let me bring up my panel really quickly without another further. Let's introduce Lily, Haran, and Mr. Chaz.
Hola, hola, hola.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hello, how is
Welcome.
everybody? How is everybody? Mr. Chaz, good to see you up front. How much time do we have with you, sir? Because if you don't let us know, we'll abuse it and keep you here 2 hours.
I get it. I have a podcast myself, so I get it.
Okay.
Cutoff time 9:30 Eastern works for me.
Okay.
We blocked off an hour for the conversation.
Okay,
Perfect.
awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for replying to me. You know what I mean? I slide in DMs and most people think, who is this crazy woman? Is she a bot? What is she selling? So I'm really glad that you responded. I've been following your channel for a while. I like what you do over there. I love the songs that you do for the babies. I love the songs. If you guys don't know, you can follow. Is it Mr. Chaz on Instagram?
Yes, MRCHAZZ.
Okay, Mr. Chaz on Instagram. He has these really adorable songs to get children to do things that I'm going to use with my grandbaby when I see him again. I'm happy I got these little songs so he can wash his hands and little things that buckle up. I saw the buckle up today.
Oh, I need to send it
But
to my brother.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I love what you're doing over there. Now, tonight's topic is going to be a little more serious than that, right? I do want to talk about spanking straight up. I am someone who was spanked or beat. I'm anti. Right. I'm one of those people that grew up and I was like, I did do it. I did do it. And then I was kind of like, it was one of those surreal moments where you look at your hand and you're like, why did I just do that? Like, where did that come from? How is that helping me? Why is this even something I wanted to do, or is this learned behavior? And thank the universe for myself and my child. I was like, yeah, won't be doing that again. Didn't feel good. Didn't get it. Before we begin, I wanted to briefly let Lily and Haran talk about their experience, whether or not they got spanked and whether or not they are for it now as adults. Also, chat, hold me down. If you have any questions for Mr. Chaz or anyone up here, you want to challenge something. If you're one of those people that is like, I got spanked, I'm fine. By all means, you know how we do on the block. Everybody's entitled to their opinion, even if we don't agree with it. Okay. So, Lily and Haran, can you briefly tell us some history about your experience with spanking or not? Because I don't know if you guys got spanked. Well, one of you I do.
Well, it's funny because I just got off the phone with my bestie. We were kind of going down our spanking road, right?
Oh,
And I didn't really get spanked per
okay.
se. My mother was the type that's going to pick up an item and throw it. No, like she just, and her aim.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, lady, you missed your calling in something. I don't know if it was dart throwing. I don't know what it is, but she kicked. It was like shoes with like stilettos would turn the corner. Like I don't know how she did it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, the worst thing I ever was hit with was a bucket of chitlins.
Oh,
Okay, yeah, there's a
oh.
story behind it. Okay.
You must have smelled wonderful after.
Oh, it was wonderful, and I think she wanted to hit me again because like some of the chitlins fell on the ground. So like it's like yeah,
Right.
but
What is going on?
so yeah, but I will say this, like it wasn't like all the time, and but it was sporadic. It was like this. it left me like, oh, my mom is crazy. Like
Mm-hmm,
literally,
mm-hmm.
like I literally was like, my mother is crazy. Um, and so I was one of those people who was very divided on this. Like I wasn't clear on how I
Okay.
felt about it for a long time. And that was what we were talking about on the phone. It took me a while to come to the conclusion that, like, if I had children, I wouldn't do it. And you know what made me come to that conclusion?
Mm-hmm.
Crazy enough, having animals. I was like, I've never
Really?
hit my animals, and I've been really upset. Like, animals piss you off. And I said,
Okay.
if I wouldn't hit an animal, why would I hit a child? So that was what brought me. That was my wake up call, of like
Interesting.
having animals for years and never hitting them, because I know people hit their animals for whatever reason. I'm like, I can't bring myself to do that. So I'm like, why would I hit a child? So
Interesting.
that's when I made the decision that was when I still wanted to have children.
Okay, we're not even 10 minutes in, and they are dropping the Bible verses on us. All right, thank you, Harumi Ada. Harumi Ada says Proverbs 29:17, discipline your children, and they will give you peace of mind and will make your heart glad. All right, okay. And speaking of Bible verses, how are you, Alfred Ivy? Welcome to the panel again. Can you hear us? Can we get some light on you, Alfred? You look like you're in the witness protection program right now.
Oh, sorry.
That's
Yeah,
good. There
I
you
usually am in witness protection, but yeah.
There you
Yeah, how
go.
y'all
There
doing
you
today?
thank we are really good. Thank you. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the panel again. Mr. Justin, I see you. You could come on up if you like. All right, guys. So it's gonna be a full house. Again, there are a lot of strong feelings around this. So we left off on Lily Haran, what say you? Because then I want to get Mr. Chaz to open up this can. It's gonna be a can.
Well, yeah, I was spanked. Well, wouldn't necessarily call it spanked.
Mhm. What would you
More
call it?
so accosted.
An
You
assault.
know, many
Okay.
many a time. You
Okay.
know what I mean? You know, I will say that in West Indian culture and Caribbean culture, period. I mean, it's a very normal thing. It's a very normal thing to
Hmm.
slap the shit out of your kid. Now, when I had my daughter, I just I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I just couldn't wrap my head around the idea. I didn't even try to like balance out the pros and the cons. I just couldn't wrap my head around even put my hands on my daughter. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Do
Hmm.
I speak to my daughter sternly? Does she know when I'm not playing? Like, yeah, she knows that.
Okay.
And there are boundaries. There are ways to set boundaries without, what I mean, having a child believe that you're going to enact physical violence on them. And I was successful with that with my child. And plus, I didn't want my child, me being a man, my daughter growing up believing that after a man puts his hands on you and he says he loves you, that is a normal thing.
Mm.
So
So I'm sorry,
there's
guys.
a number of things that goes along with it.
Really quickly, I hear music. Someone has music playing in the background. I don't know who it is.
Oh, I wonder
It's
if
like a
that
melody.
might
It's a
be.
melody.
That might be. Let's see if I can put headphones on.
Okay.
Is
Someone's
it
getting
gone
their
now? Do you
their,
hear
their Tchaikovsky on back there.
it? That's good stuff.
Okay. Yep, we're good.
But we can't. Oh,
But
yes,
now,
I'm muted.
No, he's muted. He's muted.
oh,
He's
you're
just muted.
muted.
He's just muted.
You're muted.
All right, we're back. We're back.
Yes,
All right.
thank you. Yay, yay, yay.
Can
Um,
you
yep,
still
we
hear the
Yeah, we can
music
hear
in the
you.
background?
Perfect.
No.
Oh, good now. Okay, cool. Yeah,
You
there's
good,
this.
Jen?
I live
we're
in an
good.
area that's like busy and loud, so
Okay,
sorry
all
about
right.
that.
Yeah, definitely heard music. No worries at all. Thank you for correcting that. Thank you for the first super chat of the night. Louis Cognier says, I got whipped by clothes hangers, extension cords, raw hide, boot strings, whipped till my blood came out. Lord Almighty. All right, Louis Cognier. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry you went through that. Now, I don't know how you feel about it because, again, some people say, hey, I went through that and I'm fine, right? So sorry you went through that. Sounds horrible. Alfred Ivy, how are you, sir? Are you with us, Alfred?
Yes, ma'am. I'm here.
Hey now. Okay, so I know before we pass the mic to Chaz, I'm really leaving because he's our guest. Won't leave the best for last for this segment. But Alfred Ivy, I know you are a religious man. So are you for spare the rod, spoil the child? Would that be your
Um,
stance?
I'm kind of in between, so I'm kind of like Haran. I got plenty of we call them whoopings in my house though. You got plenty of whoopings growing up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
My daughter turns 10 in a few weeks, and she's probably had a handful of spankings from me, which I really absolutely hated doing it. And because I would literally have like nightmares almost. Like I hated doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been times when I had to sit down and say, we went through all the progressive things that the super smart people tell you that you're supposed to do, and we were left with we gotta correct this behavior. This cannot continue. And so, as much as I am anti spanking, I confess to having spanked, and it is my prayer that I don't ever do it again, because it really does trouble my spirit. I mean, I got plenty of whoopings as a kid, and I was like, hey, I earned it. I'm not too upset about it. I'd be like, yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
did that. So um, but I also know that we're supposed to try to do better. And so for me, um, spanking my child has really just been like its own level of torture for me. Um,
Wow.
and so I don't I try not to. It like literally it'll have to be like the last resort for me. And so it's been a few times that I can, and I even some of them I can remember because that's how much they traumatize me. I don't know how
Yep.
they hurt, but I know they bother me. So I am, because I'm concerned that the title, and that's why I logged on. I was like, "Are you damaging your children with spanking?" I was like, I don't want to. She's the most happiest, joyous child. I mean, like, if you meet her, you'd be like, wow, she really is that sweet. And I'd be like, I don't want to be the guy to mess that up. I like it's a beautiful responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to be the guy to mess her up. She is not of this world. She doesn't have any hatred. She doesn't none of that. I mean, she's 9, but imagine if you can make it to 19 and have this same beautiful spirit. Then I've done my job. I'm like, hey, she's not any of these Facebook kids. She is beautiful. She's happy. She don't got a bad word to say about nobody. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I don't want to contribute to that. So I'm really trying to like not put my hands on this
All right.
child and not
Well,
even scare her like
thank
that.
thank
Like I
thank
don't
you
I
for
don't
being
believe it.
Thank you for being honest. Before we pass the mic to Mr. Chaz, thank you again for the super chat, Louis Conyer. Louis Conyer says, I'm fine. Baby boomers were brutal to us Gen Xers. Okay, so Louis said that he was beat with cords, extensions, hangers, clothes hangers till blood came out, but he's fine. So let's dissect that, Mr. Chaz. And again, welcome, and thank you for your time today.
I, before I go on, I'd like to ask Ivy, if you don't mind. Ivy, is that your
Alfred
name?
Ivy. Mm-hmm.
Alfred Ivy. If you don't mind sharing, if you do mind sharing, feel free. You don't have to share. But I'm curious as to what those behaviors were that your 9-year-old was exhibiting that, pushed you to, now we have to spank her, because you mentioned you didn't want to, but there are certain behaviors where you felt like you had to. And I'm just curious if you don't mind sharing what those behaviors were.
Okay, so let's say she's 9. Let's say she's averaged one spanking every year, 2 years. Okay. Because clearly when she was a baby, she didn't. But there was let's see, there was one instance when she was young, where um she was throwing food. You feed them, and it's like it don't matter what you feed them, they just throw food. And it wasn't like a spanking, but I popped her like, hey, that's not what we do. There was another instance I recall where we potty training. I'm telling her, hey, do you have to go to the bathroom? Go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. And she stood right next to me. I kid you not, she stood right next to me and crapped her pants. Like, like it would have been funny, except that it wasn't, you know. And so that was one time. There was one time when she actually was mean to another child, and we were trying to correct that. And she was younger. I think she either pushed a kid or something like that, pushed him, hit him, or snatched something from him, whatever it was, and that wasn't appropriate. But the one that was the most recent one was school. She is a high intelligence child. I mean, she's just beautiful, but she was going to school for months and not doing any work, and it didn't matter what we said to her. They literally would talk about putting her back a grade. Now you got to understand, her parents have like all of the degrees that you can get. So when you got parents who are up there, you want your kid to at least get to in their range. And she would just refuse. It didn't matter. Well, let's talk about it. Let's do this. Send the homework home. Let's do that. And then finally, it just got into the point where she wasn't doing any schoolwork, and then she started to be a bother to the other children. And that was like, hey, you've taken it to the point where we can't talk to you about this no more. We have got to say, look, if this continues, there's gonna be some consequences come along with that. And that really bothered me, because it was a real long talk. And I say, hey, this has to be corrected. We've talked about this. Now there has to be something, there has to be a consequence that comes with that. And that's one of, for those of you who don't know, I am also an attorney. I practice in criminal defense. And so I see a lot of times where people don't understand the consequences of their behaviors, and there has to be a consequence. And for children, as sad as it is to say, sometimes the consequence, taking a tablet away isn't enough, putting them on punishment isn't enough. There has to be a consequence that works for them. And for her, the spanking was the consequence that I thought in that moment worked for her. I had run out. So
Okay.
that's my confession.
Thank you.
I tried it all. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that, because I hope in this, we're going to talk about spanking. The title is "Are You Damning Your Children with Spanking?" And I hope in this conversation to not just talk about whether or not spanking is or isn't harmful, but also to be helpful to people who are looking for another way to do it, or to, like, Alfred Ivy just said, like, I don't want to spank my child. And I think that's true for, if not all, but most of, or if not all, adults, that it's the last resort. It's the thing that we don't want to do, but sometimes we feel like we're backed in our corner, we have to do it, or and then insert thing that we're afraid of. And so I've been taking notes, and I actually want to kind of address some of what everyone here said on the panel. If you don't mind, if you would like to ask like more specific questions, but first, Lily mentioned, she said her mom was like, I thought she was crazy, right? And you said that's what you took away from it, but it's like, was she crazy, or was she unable to manage her emotions and respond in a different way? Because even all these stories, then even like the three ones that Ivy told, a lot of times it has to do really more with our inability as adults to manage our emotions and find a different way. There is this a paradigm shift that we can have of, the traditional paradigm is like, if a child is not listening to me, they're not meeting my expectations, then what is required is more force and more, more I have to exert power, more force, hurt them so that they step back into line. Another way that we can see it that will completely change the way that not only how we approach it, but how we grow from it. But it's maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe there's something that I don't know. Maybe about my child. Maybe about what my expectations, what they're able to do. Maybe there's something emotional going on with them. Maybe there's another way to handle it that I'm just not currently aware of at this moment. And uh, uh, that will send us down a path of, if we take that second approach, that second paradigm shift of, there's got to be another way, and maybe there's something here that I'm missing. that will push us to learn even more, and a lot of times even build our relationship even more. And I talk about three words: see, guide, trust. And the idea is that we have to be able to see a person before we're able to really effectively guide them. And a lot of times we do these harsher methods of, of spanking, a lot of times because we don't understand what's going on. We don't know how else to solve the problem. So we resort to our default. And for a lot of our default is we resort to our default, which is how we were raised. And also the other part too is there's a survival piece here. Your survival skills are fight, flan, freeze, right? And so when we feel that our survival is at stake, fighting is one of those skills that we will use, right? And and that's something important to acknowledge, especially as I see all these people of color here talking about parenting. A lot of times we're thinking about, oh, if I don't nip this in the bud right now, if I don't correct this harshly, then this is going to turn into, if they think they can disrespect me, then they're going to disrespect the police officer, and who's telling what they might do, right? They may not be able to come home, right? The child that looks like us may not be afforded the same uh, 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 chances, right, to learn from their mistakes. And all this stuff often is running through our heads and pushes us to decide to spank, or maybe even sometimes it's decided, or sometimes drives us to spank. Sometimes we're upset. Sometimes it's a very conscious decision. And before I talk about is it damaging or is it not, I just want to just acknowledge that the difficulty of learning a new way to guide your child. Because when you think, everyone in this chat grew up with spanking. We all grew up with spanking. So when it's your child and they, disrespect you, they talk back to you, a lot of times we're thinking like, oh, that would have never flown. I could have never done that growing up. You know what would have happened to me? You're lucky I'm only giving you a spanking with my hand, because say that to your grandma and see what happened, right? All these things, like our default starts to come up. And then even when we're like, hey, I'm committed to doing something different, even then it's like, okay, but what does that even look like? Right? I don't even know what that looks like because I didn't have a lot of experience with that. And then we go and we listen to the podcast, or we read a book, or right. And so we try to, okay, we're trying something new. We're trying something different. That's not going to always go perfectly either, because mistakes are an essential part of the learning process. And it takes more than just reading a book, or listening to a seminar to change the way that our bodies are programmed, right? There's a really good book that is called The Body Keeps the Score. And it
Hmm.
talks a lot about how, what happened to you. Really good book about Oprah and Dr. Bruce Perry. Also,
I just read it. I just finished reading it.
great, great. And so they both talk about, in very different ways, about how the things that happen to us, it's not just, they're programmed in us. And that is a hard thing to overcome. And so I just want to acknowledge that first. I will allow, I'm sure people have some things to say. Then I'll talk about, is spanking harmful or not, and when we talk a little bit about the research and all that stuff. But first, I just want to acknowledge the difficulty of of uh, trying not to trying a different approach that is void of spanking when you grew up, and that was that is the parenting that you grew up with.
Okay, I wanted to just piggyback off what you're saying. I think this comment is great for it, and my goodness, a lot of people in the chat are like, "I got my ass whooped. It was Joe Jackson level." So this is very common in our communities, and it's very brutal. It's
Very.
brutal just reading some of these comments. Isaiah Washington says, "My mama slapped my hand when I touched the stove because that was the lesson. It's not violent or lazy just because it gets physical." Uh, Mr. Jazz, how do you think his mother could have handled that differently? We all got that smack. I think we all try to touch the stove because fire is pretty, is it not? You're little, you're like, what's that pretty blue thing? You want to touch it. What's a better way his mother could have handled that situation and give him the lesson without the violence?
Yeah. So there's a reaction and there's a response, right? The reaction is appropriate when there is that child is literally like about to touch it right there. That you're gonna react. Yeah, move their hand out their way. You don't have to slap them. You can move their hand out of the way, and then you can really teach a lesson. The real lesson is that the stove is hot. If you touch it, it will hurt you, it will burn you, it will hurt you, right? And to teach that lesson, you don't have to hit them, you don't have to hurt them. You can teach a child that this is hot without actually having them. You can have they can be close to it and touch it. They can You can have it where it's in a lower setting. Say, look, this is not even like this is heating up and it's still getting hotter, right? And recognizing that, like, there's a lot of ways you can go about it. One, you could have it like, okay, so you really want to know, you really want to learn about the stove, the oven. Okay, I'm going to turn it on a low setting, but I'm going to turn it on and you're going to feel the heat. Oh yeah, it's starting to get hot. Yeah, it's starting to get hot. And you put your hand on it so that you can gauge and make sure that they're not actually burning themselves. But noticing like this is hot, right? And they'll learn that lesson very quickly. Oh yeah, this is getting hot without burning themselves. Might be a little bit like, oh, uncomfortable, but noticing, oh, this is hot. I probably should not touch it. And you're
Mm-hmm.
still there to make sure that they don't actually burn themselves, that there's no permanent damage that is happening, right? Another one that is very common is like the child is running in the street. I have to spank them because, because I'd rather spank them than get hit by a car. The same thing, reaction, they run in the street, react, grab them, pull them back, right? But ultimately, what you want to teach them is parking lot street safety. And ultimately, what you also have to understand is that your children, especially we're talking about like 2 year olds, like they're going to do there a lot of things that they're doing that they're getting hit for are things that are developmentally appropriate for their age. And it's just normal child development that they're going to be curious and want to play and not and we have to part of our job as a caregiver is managing our own expectations and not
Mm-hmm.
expecting a 2 year old to have impulse control. um, and so part of it is us kind of managing that and making sure that we're keeping them safe, that they're holding our hand. But the other huge part of it, the work, right? That the discipline, because I'm going to hit the quote right now. Discipline means to teach. It comes from disciplina, Greek root word, means to teach, right? Doesn't mean to, and we want to get biblical. Like, when did you ever see Jesus beating up on his disciples? Like, what proverb was that where now there were lessons, he was teaching lessons, but he wasn't hitting them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want to talk it from a biblical perspective. Follow the lessons of Jesus, right? He wasn't hitting his disciples. It means to teach, but there are a lot of lessons in there. And so you mentioned a song. Actually, I have a song. What do 2 year olds and 3 year olds and 4 year olds, a lot of times they really love songs. And part of the reason why I use songs, because it's an easy way to teach them. It'll stick in their brain. It hits a part of the brain they want to repeat. They can learn from it. So I'm going to share the song that's a part of parking lot streets, that teaching parking lot street safety that I created and I made up. But also part of it is prepping them for it. It's practicing it, going through the literal motions. Because if you just say it, words auditorily, it's in one ear and out the other. And that's
Mm-hmm.
because we say that all the time, but it's real. And the reason is because uh, their executive skills are not fully developed till 25, 26. And especially this 8 and younger, the very beginning of developing their executive skills. One of those executive skills is working memory, the ability to really hold information in their head. That's why things are in one ear and out the other. So,
Mhm.
um, that's why it's important to like model and use visuals and to take them through the process rather than just using words to just say it to them.
Mhm.
Okay, so here's the song, and it goes like this: When we walk across the street, we look both ways. When we walk across the street, we look both ways. I hold my mama's hand. When we cross, we have a plan. When we walk across the street, we look both ways. Now that, right now we're teaching them, right? Instead of we focus so much on how can I stop my child from doing X, instead it's more helpful and more impactful to focus on how can I teach my child W, right? How can I teach them how to, and in that song, right, teaching what we really want them to do is to hold our hand and to look both ways, right? They run in the street, we hit them, they don't learn that lesson, right? They might learn to like be scared, but they don't learn the lesson. And so when you're not there, like that lesson isn't stuck with them because we just taught them to be, afraid of us and, maybe lock out and maybe fawn and just like kind of people please to us. But we didn't really teach them how to navigate the street in a safe way. Um, and so that is a very long way of answering a bunch of
Oh,
questions.
you hit a really good something. You just gave me an epiphany. The biggest thing for me that I felt like whooping did for me was to teach me how to people please, because that was such in my adult years, one of my hardest, like biggest things that I had to get over. And now I'm like, oh wow, I'm making the connection. Okay, because you can't whip someone into better behavior, but you can teach them how to, like, okay, when I'm in front of this person, I act like this. When I'm in front of these people, I act like this. It kind of teaches you how to do that. So wow,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that stuff is like that people pleasing is like programmed in your body. So let's talk a little bit about the damage. Um,
Yes,
you know,
please.
the recent study, and not that I think studies or research is necessarily going to convince everyone because research doesn't necessarily change people's minds, but I will share for you. And I'm not
Mhm.
even going to talk about like, there's a lot of research to talk about like how it impacts the behavior, increases aggression, and cognitive, pretty much it, uh, it creates cognitive problems with children. It makes it creates mental health challenges. Even outside of all of that, um, I want to talk about research that kind of came out of Harvard that is called the Corporal Punishment and Elevated Neural Response to Threat in Children study. And what they were doing is they weren't just looking at behavior because a lot of times behavior can be deceiving. What we see on the outside and how we interpret it on the inside can
Mhm.
sometimes be deceiving. And a lot of times our focus is on, just to change the behavior. So we'll do all these things. That's a whole nother conversation. But anyways,
Mhm.
what they found, they were looking at the reactions in the child's brain, um, and seeing how the reactions, uh, how children who were spanked and what was happening internally in their brain. And what they found is that children who get spanked, like that elicits the same response in the brain. When a child gets spanked, it elicits the same response in the brain, the same things happen in the brain as when a child is sexually abused. It's
I
the
read that.
same reactions in the brain. And I also, it's also one third of Americans in America, one third of parents report spanking their children on a weekly basis. Right. And so this isn't something that is uncommon. This is something that is very common, very normal, even outside of, Caribbean people of color. Right. This is in a lot of cultures. Uh,
Mhm.
but it is, I mean, just recognizing that like that is the kind of harm that we are creating. And then something, how do you say, I don't want to say your name, Haran?
Yes.
Hmm.
You mentioned you didn't want, you know, I think what you said was, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase and kind of, but
Mm.
what you were saying, but you didn't want to normalize really abuse with your daughter,
No.
to normalize that it is okay to be hit, and that hitting is a way to show love, right? And you, it sounded like that was something that you were very intentional about not wanting to, or conscious of not wanting to normalize. And I think
Absolutely.
that's a really, that's can be a pretty good gauge. Like if you don't, like you are teaching them like what is okay and what's not okay to be treated, and how to be treated. And and not to say this happens with every child, right? There's so many variables that go into this, but if you wouldn't want be okay with your child when they grow up, their spouse doing it to them, then why would you do it to them, right? Why would you normalize that behavior,
Hmm.
right? But again, this becomes really hard because for us, it's like, what else do I do? Like the spanking and the aggressive yelling and like putting our emotions on the child, like that's what we grew up with. And so it's really, really difficult to find a different way to do it. But I will tell you that it starts with us managing our own emotions. uh you know the bucket of chitlins, right? When she threw the bucket of chitlins, I that was probably a reaction, right? And she did it probably. If she would have thought that through, she probably would have at least decided something else to throw at you other than the bucket of chitlins, because what did that do other than it made a mess, and like she had to clean it up. And so this wasn't someone who was making really a very conscious choice. This was someone who was making a reaction, and and might have been in survival mode. A lot. And something else I want to acknowledge is that a lot of people live in survival mode. And so when you are when you're in a constant state of a survival mode, it means you're going to be reacting more, and you're going to have less access and be able to practice that part of the brain I talked about before, the prefrontal cortex, that's not fully developed till 25, 26. You're not going to be able to exercise that and use that as much as when you're in survival mode. And just to name some of the other executive skills that children are developing, and this is the capacity to develop it, not your ability, because you can still develop the ability for these skills. Good news for us adults who are older than 25, 26, who want to teach children these skills, because part of the way teaching is modeling it. But I'm going to tell you some of the executive skills, and then I'll let you kind of take the conversation. But I think this is important.
Hmm.
Emotional regulation is an executive skill. Um, Perspective taking is an executive skill, being able to see someone else's perspective. Empathy is an executive skill. Time management is an executive skill. Impulse control is an executive skill. Working memory is an executive skill. Organization is an executive skill. And I'm missing a few, but these are all things um, that are, we cannot uh, spank children into developing these skills. And if we do, then, or if it appears that we have, because we haven't really, but if it appears that we have, because we'll do a lot of things in the sake of changing their behavior,
Hmm.
probably probably traumatize them in some way.
Hmm.
What we want to do instead is understand what skills they're lacking, what they're struggling with, really seeing them, really understanding everyone's doing their best they can with the skills, knowledge, and resources they have access to in that moment. The child, and you too as a parent, even if you're spanking, it was the best you could do at that time, that you had access to in that time. And
Right.
maybe like later, and then when you thought about it, you're like, what, I could have handled a little differently, right? When you're regulated, but like you just didn't have access to those skills in that moment. And that was probably your mom with the like the bucket of chitlins. She wasn't really. probably wasn't really thinking about what happened after she threw it and how to clean it, but that was the reaction. So if we want children to learn the skill to regulate and respond, they have to see us doing it regularly. We have to create a culture of doing it. We have to do it to them. We have to model it, and we have to instruct them in it.
Okay, really quickly before I pass the mic, I want to say, guys, you're throwing really good comments into the chat. Do it with a super chat. I don't want to miss some of the stuff that you're saying, but do it with a super chat because a lot of people are talking, and I can't pull every comment up. Also, I wanted to go over just the list of things really quickly that that come as a result of spanking children. This is science. This is not just my opinion. And this is just part of the list. We got depression, anxiety, feelings of hopelessness, drug, alcohol abuse, general psychological maladjustment, development of distant parent-child bonding. So you do create a wedge later on in life between parent and child where there is like a bond that you break, right? When children feel unsafe around you, right? It manifests as they get older. Like, I can't really trust you, right? I want to pull up this comment real quick and then pass the mic to Haran. Mr. Justin says children in low-income homes are 3 times more likely than economically secure children to experience violence. Conrad Heibner, poverty and abuse are often intertwined processes. I do want to address that next, but I want to pass the mic to Haran. I know Haran, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just want to say something real quick. Particularly to Black people, it's not a badge of honor to be broken or traumatized. Okay, it's not some sort of rite of passage.
We're seeing that a lot in the chat right now. We're seeing that a
It's
lot.
just not. Just because you didn't die, doesn't mean you weren't destroyed. And I'll say that again. Just because you didn't die doesn't mean you weren't fucking destroyed.
Hmm.
Now, I'll give you an example. A lot of y'all can't even sit down and you don't have solid conflict resolution. You don't have solid conflict resolution skills. You automatically think that if somebody got to sit down and talk to you about an issue that they might have, immediately get on the offensive. You're ready to call somebody out their name. You're ready to, probably put your hands on somebody and so on and so forth. When people are just trying to have an adult conversation with you. Look, I get it. I grew up in the hood too. Yes, I grew up around violence. I was literally raised in violence. You know what I mean? The spankings a lot of times really didn't work on me. I'll tell you that. I done burned the house down, got an ass whooping. Threw a hockey stick in the kid's eye, got an ass whooping. You know what I mean? One time before I was playing around with glass and I cut up all 10 of my fucking fingers, I had to get dragged to the goddamn hospital and get 10 stitches in all of my fingers. And after my hands healed, I got an ass whooping. Still probably did some dumb shit after that. So let's not sit here and say that, well, we need to use it to discipline our children and it's a mechanism. Well, let's be real. If that was really the case, Black people would be some disciplined motherfuckers. Because if anybody uses violence to actually solve a situation, it's us. Okay? All right, let's just be real with that. And I'll pass the mic on that.
I have a question too.
Really quickly, let me acknowledge the super chat, Lily. Thank you for the super chat. Louis Conyer says, unfortunately, violence and sexual dominance is currency in the hood for males.
Absolutely.
And also, I want to acknowledge this comment. New Diamond says, you can't treat every child the same either. Each responds differently. One may need a hard punishment, others not. But then New Diamond, I will challenge that comment and say, do some women need to get beat and others not, right? Because it's violence. It's just that some violence is towards children. But if this husband thinks this woman isn't making the sandwich correctly, maybe she needs that extra correction. Would you still feel the same way? Maybe he feels like, well, I needed to beat this wife, but that wife made my sandwich correctly, but this one doesn't, so let me beat her. So we have to be careful what we say when we're talking about, well, this kid needs extra discipline and this kid doesn't. But I do agree, all children are different, right? These are human beings. They are not mini me's. They're not carbon copies of us. And I think that parents confuse our children with, you're supposed to be a mini me. You're supposed to think like I think and do school like I did school and have discipline and not do drugs. You're supposed to be me, just a smaller version. And I think it's a huge mistake when we do that. That is its own entity, its own soul, its own curiosity, its own habits. I think, adults mess that up. Like, no, you're supposed to be a mini me. I don't believe in that. You shouldn't either. It's a mistake we make. I want to pass the mic. Lily, what were you saying?
Well, I have a comment and then I have a question. So the comment is, I did research for this show, right? And when I was looking to do the research, it was nothing but negative outcomes from studies, right? So then I said, okay, well, let me be fair. Let me go looking and searching for the positive of it. Even when doing that, they had to literally split hairs to find a positive, only to kind of follow it up with, well, there's no long term, we this particular study doesn't know what it's going to do long term, because the way that they split the hairs was like, oh, don't use two hands, or don't use the bucket of chitlins or two hands, use one hand, but the tip of the hand, like they were kind of doing it like that, right? To split hairs to try to make it right, only to say, well, we still don't have definite proof that it doesn't harm the child psychologically, right? So that's to say, in all of the studies, there's no studies that say that spanking is beneficial. That's one thing. So the question is, has there been a connection for people of color, and I'm specifically talking about people who come from a lineage of slavery, right? Is there a connection with that, with from slavery to spanking, and why we justified, and why is it like muscle memory? Is it some type of like passed down, like, because I even look at things, there were things that I didn't think affected me. Most of my stuff was verbal. My parents were very verbal. And I realized once I got out the house and I got into relationships, I communicated the exact same way. Very unhealthy.
Lily. It's time. Let's talk about race. Mr. Chaz is like, what just happened?
Okay.
That's something we do on the block when it's time to talk about race, right? And Lily brought up a great point. Lineage, slavery. Some people in the chat were like, hey, we beat our kids because of slavery and the slave master beat us. And then someone else said, no, people were beating their children out in Ethiopia long before slavery. Mr. Chaz, what say you about that? What say you about spanking and race?
Yeah. There's a lot that says and suggests that says that in Africa, a lot, many African cultures were they're not hitting their children the way that they view their children were different. Like they really put children on a pedestal and thought they were, thought they were uh, connected to God, and children were really supposed to be respected in a lot of African cultures. One, two, there definitely is such thing as kind of the intergenerational trauma that is passed down through our bodies. Now, I will say on this, there is the research on that is evolving, and we're still learning a lot about that. So that's not something I can really speak definitively on, but that we are learning about that is something that we are starting to learn about. And so yes, even through our bodies, like those certain genes can be expressed in certain ways, but that trauma can be passed down through our bodies. Two. And then three, I think the bigger really impact is the sociological impact of, slavery, yes, but like all the institutionalized racism that came after that and continued after that. I talked about when you're in a survival state, you're going to be more reactive. You're going to be more likely to use fight, flaw, and freeze, right? Those kind of skills. And so when you take a whole group of people and don't allow them, when they don't have any economic power or control, and everyone's in poverty, and you don't allow them to have the same access to benefits as their white counterparts, they weren't benefiting from the GI Bill or anything like that. Like there's no wealth that was, we're able to build due to the policies that were in place. Uh, that is going to put a group of people in more of a survival state, and you're gonna have you're gonna see them use more survival skills. But there's also not just that, not just talking about being in poverty but also the real life concern of just like, and I hear it all the time, and I like I know this because I hear, like, when I talk to people about spanking, like, why do you do it? And especially black parents in the black community, and even heard it from my own parents, in my own family, that I need to. It's the idea of I need to whip you into shape, keep you in line, so that massa won't do it. I'm going to protect you so massa doesn't. I'd rather harm you than massa do it. Right. And so I said massa, right? We're talking about slavery times, but that evolves, right? It's no longer, people no longer say massa. Now people point to the police,
Yes. I
right?
hear that a lot.
And so it's all of these things culminating that will increase the likelihood that someone will choose to spank their child or not. Now, not to say that all those things in place. I also want to say that there are many black parents out there who are breaking that generational cycle and I mean, we got one right here above me, breaking that generational cycle. And even I'm going to point to Ivy too, because even he said that he spanked his child. His such an improvement. You heard what he was saying before. Like he got, I think, were you the one who said accosted? Maybe that was Haran. But it doesn't seem like your parents were as thoughtful about trying to avoid the spanking, right? And so even in that, like, that is huge, and that's something that should be celebrated. And I'm always like, avoid being a perfectionist, be an improvementist. The goal isn't to be perfect every day. The goal is to improve a little every day. And so, I think that, both of these, shout out to these black male parents. Can we just clap it up for them? Because they're both being intentional and trying to improve. And while their parenting isn't going to be perfect, that perfect parenting doesn't exist and it's not supposed to be perfect, but their children will benefit from the growth that they've had, the steps that they've taken that their parents did not take, and they will be able to build off of that. Right. And maybe some of the things that your parents never did with for you, Ivy, Alfred Ivy, you started to do with, maybe sometimes you felt like they were effective, sometimes you were. She can build off that now, and she has some of an example. Yeah, you said she's been spanked 10 times, but it sounds like it's not something you leaned on as much as your parents did. And for anyone out there who's improving, although even even if you're causing harm, we're all going to cause harm to some extent, right, as we're learning, because again, the harm is conditioned in us, it's programmed in us, and so it takes a lot of unlearning. So we're all going to cause harm to some extent. The work is to be aware of it and work to improve. And if you're doing that, like, I'm here for you, I'm celebrating you, I'm not judging you, I'm a big supporter of what you're doing, and I encourage you to go on the journey. If you want some resources to talk something, if you want to learn more about potty mastery, um, that's something that I can give you resources for. Would love to give you resources for. I know it's 9:30, but I'm going to stay on longer because I'm so passionate about this conversation. Um, but I'm going to stop right now.
Okay, I wanted to speak for the Latinos, okay, really
Oh
quickly,
yeah,
because I'm definitely of the family line of very violent discipline. I talk a lot here about my dad, Mr. Chaz, and I'm like, I make fun of it now, right? Because we use comedy to get over trauma, but my dad was tyrannical. Okay, he was very violent. That was his way of communicating. Okay, he was either, supporting the family and providing for the family, or being violent. There was no in between with my dad. I'm from spankings to tying people up to chains to, whoopings to kneeling on rice in the dark, like just really tyrannical things. But I grew up and I'm like, my dad did the best he could with what he had and what he was taught. Again, I grew up, put my hands on my daughter, felt horrible. I was like, never again. I cannot do it. I'm with Alfred Ivy. It traumatized me. I still think about it. My daughter's 30 now, and I still bring it up. And she's like, Ma, stop. I'm not even thinking about that. And I was like, but I'm thinking about it. Like it hurt me because children are precious. I love what you said about some of the African culture where children are precious, because that's how I see children. Like, how can we put hands on children? I look at my grandson and my granddaughter, and I'm like, how can you put violent hands on these children? They're the future. They have this innocence and this love and this unconditional love for adults. And I'm like, I could just never. And now I'm teaching my daughter, don't even talk to my grandchildren a certain way, because sometimes we get frustrated. It's like, I told you not to blah, blah, blah. I was like, don't even speak to them in that tone of voice, because I think even that's damaging, right? Because it's like, why are you talking to me like this? Like, I'm 5, right? So I wanted to speak to that. But absolutely, those it's cliche, and we talk about breaking generational curses a lot, and it looks great on a T-shirt. But for people that really dedicated to do it, absolutely salute you as well, because it's not easy, and we default to that violence and that I told you, and I had to catch myself. I'm like, this doesn't feel good. I want to pass the mic before we go back around. Louis Conyer, thank you for the super chats. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for coming up. Your comments, your discipline was very, very violent. You said you were beat bloody, but you're fine.
I got the rice also.
You got the rice also? Oh,
I got the rice
goodness.
and the dictionaries.
Oh my! What were the dictionaries? What did they do?
I heard about
go against the wall and you hold dictionaries in your arm.
Oh,
and if
my
your
goodness.
arms go down.
Yeah. Okay, so our dads were quite creative. Okay, so please tell us about your experience, because it sounded really brutal.
I have a lot of theories. Like, one, my parents were boomers. My father came from Jim Crow South. He grew up in the 20s. So being a black man down in segregated Georgia, that creates a lot of fears and pathologies that's built inside of you. And my father moved up to Newark during the 60s. Anybody from the New York metro area, the type of environment. But I think there's a lot of underlying things, because if you grow up in the hood, you could only watch your children for so long. When they're outside, they're going to get influenced. And where I made the comment, in the hood, violence and sexual dominance is currency for males. And I think a lot of the fear that parents do with the weapons also, when they get up a certain age, is the fear that they're going to get old enough. And I may not have a lot in life. My home is my castle. So I can't even allow my child to step up and try to be, dominant over me. So I have to exert my dominance over my child. So though he don't even think about, he felt like the word, oh, my son was feeling himself and I had to pull him in his place. I think a lot of times it's the fear of the parents, when a child get old enough. And kids go through that stage, especially males, they get that little testosterone and they want to buck up at their parents. So you got to make sure your child don't even think or even stepping up to you. And I think where a lot of that comes from also is these pathologies of living in a impoverished environment. You're living in, like the gentleman in Orange said, you're living on survival mode. So your little your little home, that's your only spot where you have control over. I may not have control working for the man or being outside, but I be damned if anybody gonna do something to me here. And I think that's where a lot of that come from.
Woo! That was heavy. Really quickly, let me acknowledge this super chat. Thank you so much, Jay Cavassier, for the super chat and supporting the show. Jay Cavassier says, I think children deserve to be spoiled rotten. Give them the best childhood memories as humanly possible. They're going to be adults much longer. Louis, that was really deep for a couple different reasons. Sounds personal. It sounds like the child that's bucking up or testing your authority, sounds like it's an ego thing with you, not so much the child, where you're checking the child because you don't want to be tested or disrespected. I know you said in the chat that you only had to whoop your son twice. Looking back, do you think, and maybe the answer is no, but looking back, do you think that you could have handled it without physical violence? And still taught him not to buck up.
I only whipped my son twice, and I felt real bad about it. But when I had whipped my son, I didn't do it instantly, reactively, because I know when I got my ass whooped, it was right at the moment. I waited. I was calm. And when I did it, it wasn't at the level I received it, but I still felt bad. Mm-hmm. But my son knows, all I got to do now is give my son the look, and he'll snap right in place when I have to tell him something, or he does something that, disrespect his mother. Mm-hmm. All I got to do is give him the look, and he'll step right in line. And I'm mad that I only had to do it twice, but at the same time, what's this phrase? Sorry, but not sorry, because where I'm at, and I see a lot of kids, even my son sees a lot of people you be around that get the kids are very disrespectful to their parents. And I ask them, do they discipline them? No, they get, no, dad, mom, even, my wife asks them, talk to them. The parents give their kids everything. So I think it's this balance of being overassertive, the heavy-handed disciplinarian, and letting a child run amok. It's like a balance with discipline. And with parents especially, this is my although I'm a stepfather, this is my first child, and there's no freaking manual out there to how to be a parent, and every environment is different, every situation is different, it's complex. But I'm very remorseful that I had to resort to that, and in retrospective, it probably could have been other measures I could have took. But what happened, and after the fact, I spoke to my son about it, the reason why it happened, and I even asked for his forgiveness. But right now, my son gets straight A's. He's boxing. I'm about to get him into catch wrestling. So right now, my son is very respectful, well-mannered, and I don't know that is that part to play. Most of the credit goes to his mother. So, but.
Oh wait, I don't want to cut him off.
I don't know if I went on a tangent or if I fully answered your question.
No, you answered the question really quickly. I just wanted to say, I wanted to touch on, you said I wasn't angry when I did it. I know that seems to be like the buffer. I hear a lot of people say, hey, don't hit your kids when you're mad. Wait till you're calm, right? It's methodical. I think it's more psychologically damaging because my dad did the same thing. My dad was very casual in his discipline. And honestly, I think it's worse for a child. My experience, you could correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chaz, but I think it's much worse when a parent is methodical and psychological, because now it's like a child doesn't even know how to process, wow, so you're not even mad, you're really, really calm, and I'm getting beat and tortured. And I can't process. So you're not even mad. You do this when you're really nice and calm. Like my dad would do things like, hey, go get me the rice out the cabinet. I want to see something. It was very, you know what I mean? It was a tactician. I'm like, did he read The Art of War before he had children? What is happening, right? And I can make jokes about it now because that is how I conquer trauma. But I think it's damaging. I don't think that's the buffer. I hear that a lot. Wait till you're calm. Don't beat your children when you're angry. Wait till you're calm. I don't think that helps. Let me acknowledge this super chat really quickly. Welcome, No Saint, to the panel. You're all the way on the other side of the world and you still checking in. What is up? Good to see you. Ryan says, brilliant convo. I've been commenting, much respect from London, England. Same issues for the Black community here. Thank you so much for that super chat. We're breaking it down. Mr. Chaz, you were saying.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think that they could both be damaging in different ways. I mean, spanking, whether you're calm or whether you're really mad, I think that aggression, it's seeing that aggression and that anger while you're being, I think that can kind of mess you up in maybe a little bit of a different way than the calm, methodical spanking. But they're both harmful. And I think, and if we take a step back and look at the larger, as I'm listening to kind of what you were saying, that we think about what we're teaching children, that the way you get what you want, the way that you solve problems is by exerting your power over another person and putting fear into their hearts, scaring them, or using physical violence to get what you want and to solve the problem, as opposed to, even though I'm very triggered and frustrated by this situation, we're going to find a way to solve this problem without using violence, right? And there are so many situations. There's not a single situation that I've heard up here that cannot be solved. And not to say that the child is never going to make the mistake again or make another mistake again, right? Like, I don't think anyone here, we all got spanked. Was that the last time you did something that your parent would disapprove of? No, right? And so, and even I would tell you, even with my approach, that your child is still going to at some point do things that you disapprove of. It's called being a kid. It's called growing up. It's called making a mistake. I mean, think about all the things. I mean, I can't speak for everyone on this chat, but I'll tell you that time between 0 and 25, 26, a lot of mistakes were happening. A lot of illogical choices were being made, right? But what we want to do, wait, oh, oops. But what we want to do is to teach children how to learn from those mistakes, and all of these. Like, man, I wish I was gonna ask him a question. I wanted to ask. He said he got beat bloody. He did the things.
Yeah, he's just backstage. He'll be right back.
Oh, okay. He can come. I'm curious if he remembers what he did to get those punishments, right? And like what steps were taken. Like, did you have a legit, or did you have a challenge that you were over? Like, were you struggling with impulse control, something you really wanted to do? Like, I'm kind of curious about that, because instead of, and even with the disrespectful child, right? And we get really, when a child says something in any kind of tone, we get, oh, who do you think you're talking to? And we get real defensive and we'll be very quick to go to violence. Meanwhile, if a child did that, like if they did that, if we saw them do that to their peers or their friend or teacher, we would be really upset and probably, you know, maybe spank them or right. And that is counterproductive, because again, we're not teaching, okay, I'm feeling triggered. I'm feeling defensive. Let me take a breath and respond, or let me take a breath and try to understand what the person is saying. To Ron's point, I hear so many people, he talked about like people, conflict resolution skills. Children never learn conflict resolution skills because we never give them opportunities. They just do something, they have conflict, and they handle it in the wrong way. We just snap at them and hit them, but we never understand, oh, you were upset because you really wanted to do this and you couldn't do this, and so you got upset and you did this. This is a better way to express yourself, right? This is a better way to say what you were trying to say. I'm not okay with you saying it the way you said it, whether whatever they did. Let them know your boundaries are important. Someone said, spoiled children to death. I get a little word with that too, right?
Mhm.
There are codified parenting styles that are proven to be, in terms of outcomes, to be more effective. Now there's authoritarian, and that is high on like the high on the expectations, and these are the rules, but no warmth, but without the warmth and the love, or not a lot of warmth and love. And this is speaking to the balance. And then there's also the permissive parenting, which is very high on the warmth and the love and come here, honey, but without the expectations and boundaries. And that sweet spot is called authoritative parenting, which is there's high expectations and boundaries, but also with the warmth and the love, right? And spanking and hitting your child, resorting to violence for so many reasons. Like it, I also want to say that we miss so many opportunities to teach when we do that, because we could have in the situation. I'm gonna try to hit every situation real quick. Child was mean to another child, right? I'm going to assume there's probably something that your child was dealing with internally and didn't know how to express it. They're upset. And so they put their emotions on the other person, just like we do as adults, right? We're upset, we're triggered, so we throw the bucket of chitlins. They had nothing to do with it. It's us putting our emotions on the child instead of managing our own emotions and responding, right? Uh, the 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 potty training one stood there and poop. I mean, that is, she's going through a learning process, and and her standing there was something going on, right? There was something to uncover. She might have been scared. She might have been just unsure about herself. She might have been a lot of things. I know that what happens a lot of times when it comes to potty training is that a lot of times when we put a lot of stress on the child around it adds more problems too, and they do things like that, and they sit there and they poop or they get constipated, and that creates more problems, right? There's so many things, and there's also too one other thing I have to say in this conversation and talk about consequences, natural consequences. We should allow children to experience their natural consequences, right? And I know, and I'm going to say, Alfred Ivy, you mentioned when you're talking about your child not meeting your expectations in school, what you mentioned, and kind of a preface to that, is that, your credentials, how well. So I imagine there's probably some kind of emotional part that happened with you, maybe some embarrassment, maybe you felt judged. There's probably some emotions that were happening there, but and you really didn't want her to be held back a grade, but or she probably would have ended up going to summer school, where you fail class, you usually go to summer school. The child doesn't want that either, right? That's probably pretty embarrassing for them. I'm gonna stand here and say that, like, that's a pretty big natural consequence, but we need to let children experience their natural consequences. You mentioned people don't know what the consequence of their actions, because we never actually let them experience the consequence of their actions. A lot of times we're on the let's just save the child in the permissive parenting, right? Let's just save them and not let them feel anything bad ever. That creates problems. Or we're like, I'm going to hit you in hopes that you don't make the mistake. Um, but the actual consequence of her actions, that she's not going to get to go on to the next grade with her friends, right? She's going to have to spend, instead of enjoying her summer and playing and having free summer like everyone else, she's going to have to go to school and go to work. These are things that she doesn't, and that is going to motivate her to learn new skills. Like, yeah, I need to do something about this school. And now this is intrinsic motivation that we're working with here. That's going to be much more long lasting, right? And it's it's going to be
Right.
easier to work with this child who's experienced natural consequences. And so I just want to say there are two other kind of consequences. There's logical consequences, which I also am a supporter of, but logical consequences should be related, respectful, and reasonable. That's a whole nother conversation. And then spanking falls under the category of illogical consequences, and so natural consequences natural consequences motivate children to learn new skills. Logical consequences motivate children to learn skills that they already have in their tool belt. And illogical consequences, like a spanking, just punish children for not having the skills yet.
Oh, really quickly, really quickly. Once again, because we have no saint here who is a white man, right? I did want to touch on this, Mr. Chaz. Before you go, I really wanted to touch on this. We hear a lot in our communities. We can be at Target, Walmart, supermarket, Lily, Haran, Alfred Ivy, Louis Conyers. We've all seen it. We've seen the white kid throwing the tantrum. I hate you. Leave me alone. And what do? Ooh, honey, I wish my kid would. We go right there. We go right there. It is the biggest form of disrespect. And we make fun of white people. We've all done it. We've all done it. I hate you, Dad. You suck. And we're looking like, oh, I would have mollywopped you in the supermarket. I would have mollywopped you. My dad would have mollywopped me. We take pride in that. We take a lot of pride in that. However, going back to the whole, well, I got to do it so the cops don't do it. I'm reading this here. It says, no matter where they live in the world, university students who were spanked as children are more likely to engage in criminal behavior. Even young adults whose parents were generally loving and helpful as they were growing up showed higher rates of criminal behavior. So beating your child does not prevent the cops from cuffing them. No, Saint, you are a white man. You
Yes.
don't beat your children. Why don't you beat your children? I'm sure they misbehave. I'm sure they've gotten bad grades before. I'm sure they talk back. I hate you, Dad. Let us know. Why don't you beat your children?
That's an excellent question. Sorry if I'm speaking a little softly. It's kind of early here. I don't want to wake anybody up.
All good. All good.
Yeah. You know, I remember a handful of times that I got spanked, and I don't ever remember exactly. I remember one time I got spanked. Maybe the last time was at 13, and I didn't get spanked a lot. And that's really what I remember. I don't remember what I did, right? It didn't stop me, as your guest says, it really didn't stop me from doing certain things that I was doing that, that got me in trouble. So for me, I always thought that spanking was just a lazy way for a parent to do something that they couldn't figure out how to teach a lesson. And yes, it is hard sometimes. Yes, my three kids are all different. The one I'm with right now was, we like to say stubborn. It could be just that he's strong-minded. And he was the most difficult because, as your guest was saying, I remember like he I guess he may have had a fear of the toilet or something like that. So up until he was like, I don't know, maybe 5 years old, at one point we were just like, okay, we're not gonna put a diaper on him. And you know what happened? I don't know, maybe 2 days into it, I had to put a diaper on him. And immediately he went to the bathroom. And I was just like, and so I talked to the doctor, and they were like, don't worry, he won't be in the diaper forever. You know what I mean? He'll figure it out. But yeah, I just never thought it was productive. I always viewed kids as, okay, if this was an adult, would I fight him, or would I use violence to get him to do what I do? And what is that going to teach? Also, if you look at it, you can tell someone that you have the death penalty. It doesn't stop murders. You know what I mean? It doesn't stop the most violent crimes. It just doesn't work. So I don't think I own the kids. I'm a parent. And I need to try to figure out what motivates them. That's all it is for me. That's how and I've heard, and that I've heard all growing up, the whole, you'd watch Oprah or something, and they used to go pick a switch, kind of like a psychological torture. You going to pick like what you do at a Japanese internment camp or something during the war.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, that's it for me. So for me, when you spank a child, all you're doing is, to me, this is my opinion, it's a form of abuse, and abuse is never really a good thing. Just to get someone to do what you want them to do without explaining why. Sometimes you're not even explaining why you're doing it, and it's much more complicated to sit there and just have a conversation. I don't know. That's just my opinion, though.
Okay. Mr. Chaz, I know you had a question for Louis Conyer. Louis, I don't know if you heard Mr. Chaz's question. Did you hear the question?
No, Kenny, please say it again.
Yeah. Do you remember why you had to kneel on the rice? Why you got beat bloody? Do you remember specifically for like each of those situations, like what exactly you did to get those punishments?
I remember. Go
Uh,
ahead, Louis.
Honestly, no, because I got my ass whooped a lot, and I mean, it's kind of funny because all my Gen Xer friends, we relive talking about it jokingly, but a lot of stuff, being the stupid ass kids, just brutality and just a lot of bullshit.
Okay.
Just being
Wow.
a dumb kid.
And I think like
I know one, I got my ass whooped severely because I didn't want to fight one of the kids in the street, and I ran home, and I severely got my ass whooped. So
and so a big thing, and my time is running out soon, so I'm going to start kind of like wrapping up,
Mhm.
kind of what I'm saying,
Mhm.
and speaking a little shorter. Um, that a lot of times we're teaching our children to exert power over another person. A lot of times in situations like children grow up and they don't know how to advocate for themselves in a way. And a lot of people will say, I'm just not going to say anything because if I do, it's not going to come out right, right? And really what they're saying is, I don't really know how to communicate and go through this conflict resolution thing. Without getting triggered and going to aggression. I'm not going to be able to manage my emotions. Um, and these are things that that are conditioned in our bodies. And if we took the time to the time and the really hard work to learn a different way to manage our own emotions and to respond in a different way and try to really understand where they're coming from, we would be so much more effective at guiding them without having to harm them. And you might have heard some of the things, depression and all the impacts of spanking. You might be saying, well, that's not me. That I don't have depression. I don't have anxiety. I'm best friends with my mom, right? And that's really great for you. And there's probably some things that you're not aware of that you probably could improve in, maybe conflict resolution skills, maybe your ability to handle when someone disrespects you and manage your emotions and not take it personally and recognize that that person is just not able, if they're attacking you, it's because they're not able to manage their emotions. More about them and less about you. um, Understand that emotions are contagious, and that we still have the power to choose what we do, and no one can make us do anything. um, and so uh, just know that there's a different way out there. There's so many people out there who are practicing what I would call a more connection and collaborative based approaches rather than fear and control based approaches. And especially now, we talked about, we don't want the women, we don't want like little girls to feel like it's normal, okay, to be treated uh, 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 to be hit or to be treated belittled, be treated like less than, and to accept that. I think it's also important to acknowledge on the other end, what are we teaching our males when we're teaching them the way to solve your problem is through power and force and hurting the other person, right? Because you can't manage your emotions. The way you solve that problem is by forcing the other person to change to what you want to happen, right? And and that has can have very terrible consequences for everyone.
Mhm.
But it's a culture that we are recreating and reinforcing. We each have the power to at least make the change for yourself. You can't
Mhm.
control someone else's thoughts, feelings, and actions, but you control your own. And how you control your own and you managing that for yourself, what's in your power, what you do, will have a profound impact on those that you care for.
Mr. Chaz, I wanted to say really quickly. I remember exactly what happened when I got the rice treatment. My dad, I was really little, and my dad had a sailboat, like a model boat that you put together, and I ripped the sail. Right, it was hard plastic, and I just picked it up and I ripped the sail. Um, I didn't. I was too young to even know that was a bad thing. I was like, oh, it's like paper,
How
and
old are you?
then
Do you know?
oh, I would say if I can guess, maybe like 8.
8. Okay.
Around
So,
about 8.
right.
I ripped the sail, and then he came in and saw the sail. He didn't yell or anything, but he went to the whole. My mom used to keep rice in that big green cracker can, and he told me go get the can, and I'm like, okay, Dad wants the green can. I didn't know why. I'm just like, you do what your dad tells you to do. And then he proceeded to, put it out on the floor and blah, blah. And I was like, I didn't know what was going on. And then he made me kneel on it. And I was like in the dark, kneeling on rice, like damn near kneecaps bleeding. And I'm like, what happened? And I can only relate it to, oh, I broke the sail. But like we discussed earlier, it wasn't the last time I did something. You know what I mean? That was against their wishes. So that's what happened to me.
Did you do it because you were mad, or you were just trying to pick it up and you accident like? Do
Yeah,
you remember?
I remember clearly, I just wanted to play with it. And then I was
Oh,
like, oh, this is like easy to rip. So I ripped it. And
right.
I was like, oh. And then, all of that unfolded. And I was
Right,
like, what
right.
is
And
it?
so what happened
Jen,
is your 8-year-old. I'm gonna stay on for a second, so I might hear you too. I think Herman also has something to say. You're an 8-year-old doing normal developmentally appropriate. You're playing, right? And I guess he had developmentally inappropriate expectations of you that you were going to not play with the sailboat that you had in your hand. I don't know why you would have a little miniature sailboat if you weren't going to play with it. And then, but you ripped it, and that was probably pretty frustrating. It probably cost some money. It probably ruined the activity. And so, like, for him, he probably maybe internally felt frustrated, or maybe you're not going to rip the sailboat again. I don't know if you play with the sailboat again, but you know,
No.
uh, right. It's like I never went on a boat after that.
Right.
No, but something we could have done proactively would be like, okay, say this is a sailboat, treat it like this, and show and physically model this is the way that you treat the sailboat. It'll rip if you're not gentle with it, like this. And physically with our hands modeling it is something that we can do, right? And you want to play with it, you rip it, you're probably going to be pretty upset, like, oh man, I ripped it, like I don't get to play with it anymore. Like, you probably wanted to actually play with the sailboat. That is a
Mhm.
consequence. So if you did get another sailboat, that would be okay. I need to make sure to be more careful this time.
Right.
And it can go like that without someone you physically being hurt. And if it
Mhm.
did, and like if you did, you ripped the sailboat, you weren't being proactive,
Mhm.
didn't manage the expectations, and that happens sometimes. Sometimes we don't expect what children are going to do. That it's just real. And that one manager own emotions because that'll probably happen. And then kind of have the conversation. A script that I'm not a big fan of scripts. It's more about the idea behind a script. But you want to next time, it's kind of a script like you wanted to play with a sailboat. Next time, treat it like this, right? If that's
Mhm.
a way that we can communicate, short words. You want it next time. Those are 2 words. You just add in what you wanted them to do, and that empathy piece opens children up. Like, oh yeah, that is what I want to do. This is how you do what you were trying to do in a better way, right? Go ahead.
Mm.
I think Haran, and also I'm not going to butcher your name, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'll just say something real quick. I'm seeing some of you want you advocate for black boys to be beaten, okay? Because you feel that Black boys need to be raised differently from daughters. But here's the funny thing. Here's the kicker. You want these black boys who eventually become black men to be emotionally available, emotionally intelligent, and completely well put together human beings when you're ready to court them and have children with them. Does that make sense? Does that make sense for a second though? And I'll also speak about the young ladies. You can't fathom why some of these young ladies stay in these relationships where they're being completely emotionally and physically abused, that struggle of. But what lies at the core of this struggle of the physical abuse, the financial abuse, the mental abuse that they saw their mother go through? Let me tell you something. Black people, you people fight tooth and nail for your trauma. And then you take that fucking trauma and you bring it to spaces like this, and you make money or you do whatever, and you fight for this division. And rather than sit down and somebody saying like, hey, maybe we need to really work on having conflict resolution skills. You motherfuckers rather do the easy thing, like run into the arms of people who don't look like you, because it's difficult to sit down and have these kinds of conversations. I'll pass the mic on that.
I do want to, before, really quickly, Louis, I do, and I know, Mr. Chaz, you have to go, but I didn't want you to leave without addressing, we're talking about normalizing abuse for women. But remember, children of abuse or toxicity or dysfunctional homes, they go one of two ways. Either they grow up, become the victim or the villain. I was one that went the other way. I went the villain. I saw my dad was big and strong, and he always won the argument because he used violence. And then when I grew up, I was like, oh, I don't want to lose. I don't want to be my mom. So I'm always going to initiate the violence, right? Whether it was verbal or physical. So there's two sides to it. We think about normalizing female being abused, but some of the women grow up and it's like, no, I'm going to hit you before you hit me, because I saw my dad do it and my dad won, and I want to be a winner, right? So I wanted to address that too. But Louis, I know I interrupted you, so I wanted you to respond, Mr. Chaz.
Me?
Yeah, Louis.
One of the things I wanted to say also, one of a lot of the conversations I have with my friends, and it's something that we do, and it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You mentioned the thing, Jen, about the Walmart. How many times when you were little, your parents tell you, if you're in the supermarket, don't touch shit, don't look at nothing, you stay right by me. But when you're in the supermarket and when you're young, and you see like the little white kids running around doing whatever they want, when you grow up and reflect on it psychologically, it hits you like they are free and I'm not. And it goes with that, a lot of the, the typical hotepper stuff, and, with the traumas and everything. A lot of the things we do, what we think is meant as a protective mechanism to protect us from consequences of white supremacy. Those same actions help perpetuate the pathologies growing up. And there's a lot of things, only a Gen Xer will understand. Like, if you was in a black home, every home had like the wooden spoon and fork on the wall, and the plastic over the couch. And like a Gen Xer, a boomer parent to tell you, don't run in my fucking house. You don't close no doors. Like, they make sure that this is their house. You have no rights or nothing. And unfortunately for a lot of us, where we're no more used to our parents, they kick us ass out of the home when we turn 18, when we're no more economically viable to them. We get kicked out of the home and everything. And, me and my fellow Gen Xer friends, we be drinking beers, reflecting over this stuff. And, and it's funny how your boomer parent will spoil the hell out of your child. And when you bring this shit up with them, like, hey, you used to whoop my ass, with a broomstick, this and that. I'm like, no, I never did that. Just gaslighting your ass. Just gaslight the fuck out of you.
The amnesia is real.
Yeah, I'm like, I mean, you can have, like, I'm telling you, get a bunch of Gen Xers and reflect. It's just mind-boggling. And you wonder why the pathology still persists in the community. And although this title of your show is about, discipline,
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you right now, a lot of this stuff has stuff to do with the current dating social scene that you're experiencing today, that with your other shows. A lot of this stuff is, when I mentioned before in your previous episodes, you gave me the privilege to talk about. A lot of this stuff comes from the root causes of stuff like this right here. That's why you see the dysfunctions. I'm gonna shut up because this is about discipline. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, and I don't want to divert the conversation. And I apologize about that.
Okay, Mr. Chaz.
I mean, it's hard for me not to stay on because it's like, there's so many points that like, yeah, I could go down a whole rabbit hole because then like, yeah, how do we learn? Because it happens, right? We get shut down by our parents and we're not, hold on. Sorry. Let me go back. We don't allow, uh, black children to be children, right? And we adultify them, right? They're seen as, uh, by outside society, a lot of times they're seen as older than what they are. And then also too in our culture, we will adultify our black children because we'll have these high expectations that are not really developmentally appropriate for them. But we have these expectations, and we will put them into a survival state for them to meet these expectations that don't really match where they should be at in their development, what they're supposed to be doing at that age, and uh, uh, and so we also, one more thing I want to add to that, and we also don't allow them to uh, 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 we also don't allow them to communicate, to find better ways. Like if they let their emotions get the best of them, we'll then also a lot of times run away with our emotions as opposed to like, okay, hold on, let's do a redo. I know you're upset, but let's try this again, right? And to really practice those because and this kind of goes into the relationship when we get when we get older. Right now we're in relationships, and now our partner does something that triggers us, right? We've been kind of conditioned to do lots, we get maybe really defensive and respond with aggression and be like, you always do this, and start like blaming and attacking the other person, and that creates that doesn't help the conversation. That doesn't get to a solution. A lot we're not even talking about what we're really upset about. Or sometimes we'll be passive because we learn like, okay, don't make waves, don't say anything, don't do anything. We'll be passive, right? And let our boundaries be crossed. Boundaries get crossed, and we hold it in. This happens in the workplace too. Hold it and hold it in until one day we blow up and we get angry, and then we get aggressive, the passive aggressive flip flop. Or we go to passive aggressiveness, and we will say something that was kind of like, we will we'll say like a smart remark or whatever, or we'll say something passive aggressively to our partner. And I'm like, why are you? What's going on here? Like, are you mad? And then a lot of times, what do we say? Like when our partner out, like, are you mad? Is something wrong? No,
No, I'm
nothing.
good. No.
Because we want to shut down our feelings as opposed to express them in an appropriate way, right? We didn't learn. I talked about aggressive, I talked about passive, I talked about passive aggressive. So what's the middle ground, right? What are we teaching? We want to teach them to be assertive, to use assertive communication, to be able to say, hey, I'm not cool with this. Treat me this way, right? And also, too, I will tell you, when you teach the skill of assertiveness and you allow them to communicate, like, hey, I don't like the way that you yelled at me. Can you talk to me? Like, can you talk to me? And we don't then get defensive. Are you talking back to me? Like, to shut that down, but allow for that, then that also opens up so much in your relationship too, because then you're able to like better understand what's going on with your child because they'll actually tell you because they're not afraid of what will happen if they speak up and they share. Now, there's definitely a learning curve in this because again, they're learning emotional regulation, so their emotions get the best of them. But for them to learn, we have to be able to not just react, even when they say something out of pocket, right? We can correct them and respond to them and say again, model that same thing, that's assertiveness. Not cool with how you said that or what you said. Let's try again. How would you like to communicate what you let's figure out what you're really trying to communicate and practice saying that. So that way, when they're in that relationship and someone their boundary gets crossed, they're not holding it in, they're not being aggressive, they're able to clearly communicate what their boundaries are and how they like to be treated, which is so necessary in relationships in general. Which it leads to a happier, healthier life, right? Because especially, man, I'm getting on an tangent. Relationships are so important for us. It's important for us to learn how to navigate our relationships in a healthy way. And so we need to be the model for that. I know a lot of it goes back to modeling, modeling, modeling. And I know a lot of times we want to just be like, focus on like, oh, I got them to step in line, or they're back in line now. And we focus on just their behavior. And it's going to be really hard. And a lot of people are going to hear me say this. They maybe not, might not be at a place to hear this right now, but I'm going to say it for the people who are ready for it, that their behavior is not everything. Us controlling their behavior is not everything. Because if it was, right, if the goal for good parenting, if good parenting equals uh, 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 behavior, and I don't want to say good behavior because good behavior often is just whatever I deem to be appropriate at the time,
Right.
depending on my judgment. And my judgment might be different than your judgment. You're different. Your good behavior, a good kid, as a lot of times for a lot of adults, is one that sits down, shuts up, and doesn't get in the way. But you know what? I want the generation of people, and we talked about race, we talked about oppression, who doesn't just sit down and shut up. I want my kids to grow up to be able to speak to oppression, to be saying
Mm.
this is not right. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say something because it's not right. Not, oh, I don't want to cause any havoc. I don't want to move any waves. So I'm just going to sit down and shut up. Oh, none of my business. I'm just going to, right, like, and that might be hard. And I'm gonna say it to you. I'm gonna get it. And one day they might say, "I hate you, Dad," because they're emotionally dysregulated and they're letting their emotions get the best of them, just like the chitlins in the bucket, right? They're letting their emotions get the best of them. And when something that we say something, and if I'm gonna drop a bunch of resources here for people who want to learn more, because this is
Mm.
definitely a learning journey, right? And conscious discipline, which is a 25-year-old social emotional learning program that is adult first, focus on the adult rather than just changing the behavior of the child. The result is that the behavior of the child does change, but it's in a very much of an adult first thing, an adult first approach. We talk about Q-tip. Remember the Q-tip. Quit taking it personally, right? Quit taking it personally. You're letting your child's undeveloped brain. Now, I brought this here because I was about to talk about the brain and really get into it, but we don't have time
Mhm.
for that. But we're letting a another phrase, who you put in control of your emotions, you put in control of you. Who's ever in
Yes.
charge of your emotions is in charge of you. So we let
Oh.
this 3-year-old uh, make us spank them because they're not meeting our expectations or they're having a temper tantrum. You're giving that 3-year-old power over you, right? And so take your power back. That 3-year-old should not be controlling your actions. They shouldn't be making you do anything, right? Um, but look into conscious discipline. There's so many ways to teach it, and you might have been like, "Oh man, I tried everything," right? And I promise you, you haven't tried everything. That there is, and there's so many resources out there. Continue learning, continue growing. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to mess up. You're going to, and the goal isn't to be perfect every day. The goal is to improve a little every day. Don't be a perfectionist, be an improvementist, and just take those little steps to improve. I want you to get from this hope. It's possible. You can do it. Um, just make the commitment to go on the journey. Look up, I'm going to some books for parent. It's easy to love, difficult to discipline, for children. I'd say it's 8 and younger, especially. I think it'd be helpful for other ages too. Another one I would recommend is Conscious Parenting by Dr. Shafali Sabari. The first one was by Dr. Becky. And then just start with that. I also have a podcast, Mr. Chaz's Leadership Parenting and Teaching Podcast, where I introduce people to like different resources, people who are talking about it from different perspectives, occupational therapists, people who work in schools, parents who are just on this journey, just trying to learn and making mistakes along the way, people who are like the experts of the experts, such a variety of people that you can learn from. And most of those people create content on social media so that in the middle of your cat videos, you're scrolling, you can get a little tip, you get a little bit of learning, and you can, that might help you in that day, might expand your perspective a little bit. And so just go on the journey. The resources are out there. Do not give up. Your children, this is there is no greater gift to give your children. We always talk about wanting to pass down generational wealth. What about passing down generational health, right? There's no greater gift to pass down to your children than these more connection and collaborative based approaches, these healthier ways of engaging in relationships as opposed to fear and control based approaches. There's no greater gift that we can give our children. So I'm here for you.
I have a question.
Really quickly, let me acknowledge this very generous super chat. Thank you, Don Levant, sir, for supporting On the Block with Jen and our panel in this amazing conversation. Don Levant says, "Wow, this is a great show. Carry on." Thank you so much for that, sir. My God, Mr. Chaz, that was a word. Lily, you were saying.
Yes, I have two questions, but I feel like they're connected.
Okay.
One, I will be interested in knowing with like if there have been some studies done from countries that typically don't do spanking. I know there are some countries that don't do spanking and how those kids end up coming out compared to the ones that spanking is, kind of the cultural norm.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, do you think or do you know that people's minds are starting to change and turn away from spanking in recent years?
100%. Yes. 100 people are learning. There's so much more. People have more access to information, especially with social media and learning a different way because it used to be that like I only had my grandma and my sister to go to for parenting advice or to talk to about this or my immediate community. And maybe everyone in my immediate community is big, like spanking, hit your child, use the rice. I'll give you want me? We'll have a community belt. I'll come over and hit your kid for you if you need to. Bring them over to my house. I'll hit them. Right. And so like if you're in that community, like it's difficult to break out of that because community is important and that support is important, especially like and so like that's harder to do when you don't have access to these other resources like podcasts, books, Audible. It's this information has been so much more accessible than it's ever been. And because it's not just saying I'm choosing not to spank. I want to be clear on that too. It's not just saying I'm choosing not to spank. It's a great start, but that's really where the journey begins. Now you got to figure out all the other things that you can do that will be helpful, right? And that is the journey, right? And then there's another part of your journey is just that whole self-healing of the unlearning all the stuff that is conditioned inside your body. So yes, it's changing. I have a whole highlight of people like just like sending messages to me, messages and comments is like, thank you so much, Mr. Chaz, for like all the work you've been doing since I've been following you, since I've been listening to your podcast. I've been using your strategies. I've seen such a huge impact in my relationship with the child and how to guide them. And it's helped me not even just with children, but also in my just peer-to-peer relationships. And I feel like there's so many I get testimonials almost every day from people sharing who are learning or on their journey and sharing just how thankful they are that they found this information and that they're on their journey. So yes, the tides are changing, but again, it's not just about saying I'm not going to spank. It's about what are we going to do instead?
Well, please, I'm glad, Mr. Chaz, that the powers that be dropped you on my timeline. You were absolutely amazing. Can we get a round of applause? I mean, out
Awesome.
of all the guests that we've had up here, this was absolutely amazing and enlightening. Mr. Chaz, please, please, please drop your social media handles one more time so people have it. And look, there's the plethora of information. You have to follow Mr. Chaz if you want to keep getting educated, because he is correct. It's more than I'm not going to spank. You have to find out the alternatives. It's an everyday process. Mr. Chaz, let us know one more again where to find you, please.
I'm Mr. Chaz on all platforms. MRCHAZZ, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, a little bit on LinkedIn, a little bit on YouTube. I have a whole little YouTube channel for kids. That's where like my songs are. And then I have the podcast, Mr. Chaz's Leadership Parenting and Teaching Podcast, where I introduce you to people that can help you on your journey. And so just start with that. Start with all the free resources. Yes, there are paid resources out there, but I should just start with the free stuff. When you're ready to take that level, when you feel ready, you can. But even without that, like there's so many out there. This information, people are giving it away for free now. So take advantage of that, especially on the beginning of your journey.
Thank you so, so
This was
much.
great. And the
Woo!
chat really enjoyed it. The audience,
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it, Mr. Chaz,
I
but they
can't. I
are.
wish I could.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Watch the
it's
playback.
amazing. You're
Watch
getting
the
a
playback.
standing
Oh,
O over here. Thank you so much for your time. You gave us more time than you said you would. Thank you so much. We're so grateful.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm happy to help. I'm really passionate about what it is. I gave the extra. It's 10:30 at night. I don't know where y'all at, but it's
I
10:30
know.
at night for me. So I am going to sign off. Find me on
Okay.
social media. I definitely want to be there to help because I think that the world needs this, and I think we will create a better world for generations and generations to come as we learn better and do better. So with that, I'm going to end. And I'm actually going to end it with this because this is the most important thing that I say all the time. It's not about being perfect every day. It's about improving a little every day. Don't be a perfectionist. Be an improvementist.
I love it.
That's
Nice.
my
I
guy.
Thank
love
you.
it.
And you're
Bye,
welcome
y'all.
back anytime.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Reach out.
Take care.
Woo!
That was awesome.
Well, block.
That was awesome.
That was absolutely amazing. Crazy Legs in the building. How are you, sir? This was absolutely amazing, enlightening. It's important that we support people who have channels and Instagram pages like Mr. Chaz. Is so, so important. This is the balance that we need, not only in the universe, but on these machines. So we can't just say, oh, I want to see something better. We actually have to support people like this gentleman. I'm so grateful he gave us the whole 2 hours. When he first started, it was an hour, then an hour and a half. But you know the block is addictive.
It
The
is.
block is addictive. It's like,
It is.
I want to leave. But it's addictive because we have great minds and we're honest, we're frank, we're candid. Thank you, first of all, for everyone who came up and was completely honest and gave us their history. It's not easy to say, you know what I mean? I got my ass whooped. Okay, but we're helping other people, and that's more important than people that are going to talk shit about us. It's much more important that we're helping other people and being honest and letting people understand that they are not alone in this journey. We're almost at the 2 hour mark, ladies and gentlemen. Any parting words? And don't forget, tomorrow we are on again. I'm going to have a Latin panel, and we're going to talk about colorism in the Latin community, activism in the Latin community, and the Black and Brown coalition. Does it exist or not? We're going to talk about that tomorrow. So tomorrow's going to be a heavy day as well. I'm going to be challenging the Latin X's, Latin A, Latin whatever they're calling us nowadays. Any parting words, people? This was amazing, amazing.
Can I
I
say
say we'll
Yeah,
something?
Louis, go ahead, Louis.
Thank you for having me up. It's been a pleasure. My parting words is, if you don't be good to yourself, no one is going to be good to you. Thank you for having me up. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, Louis. Thank you so much. No Saint, what you got?
Yeah, I just
First of all, no thing. I thought the UK got to you. I thought you was pulling an assignment on us. I was like, so what's going on? You go to the UK, and then all of a sudden, there's no more lights. It's just the ghostly look. But I get it. The kids asleep. The wife is okay. I get it. I get it.
They want you to save electricity over here.
Oh,
um, but anyway, it's sort of funny. I woke up and I normally would sleep into the morning, and I woke up and I looked and I saw this show was going on. I was like, I want to be a part of it. So, I just wanted to say a few things. I knew the guest was amazing. Um, I just wanted to share a few things. Like for me, one of the biggest punishments I received that I remember, and it was kind of effective for me, was when I might have been, I don't know, might have been 13, 14 years old, and I stole something from a store. My mom found out, and she had me return it and apologize to the store. And I think accountability like that for some people works because it's very embarrassing and you remember exactly, it's not like she didn't get upset, she didn't yell at me, she explained to me what was wrong. um, and yeah, that was something that I was like, I didn't want to do it, and I didn't want to go up there and apologize because it's admitting to somebody else, not my parents. My parents are going to love me, no matter what, but I had to show accountability to somebody else, and that was pretty strong. Another thing is, I know Erica sometimes gets very. I tend to explain with my kids, and I tend to have a conversation with them. And sometimes I can get long winded, and sometimes it does drag on. But I just think that is so important. I think your guests kind of pointed that out, that when you spank somebody, yeah, it's effective. It gets you what you want out of the situation, which is you want the kid to obey and not talk back, and you want to show that you have the power. But it really, but having a talk and finding words and try to find things that relate to the child that they can use is a lot harder. And that's why I said earlier that I think that spanking or corporal punishment is just a simple way for the person that's using it, or I like to say it's kind of lazy, in a sense. Um, and then to bring it back to what I was saying, even like I was in Dachau in Germany, and even those people under the threat of torture, under the threat of death, found ways to resist. They found ways to resist. So that kind of punishment really, all it does is it really doesn't work. If someone wants to do something, they will find a way to do it. It's much better to give them those tools to be able to, or just trying to figure out a way to show them why there's a better way. Now, with the concentration camps, that's a different situation. My point was, though, that even under threat of death, that if people want to do something, they're going to do it. It has nothing to, you're not going to stop it. So I don't know.
That's a great point, though. Even with the threat of death, they're like, I'm going to do this because I want to do it. Lily Haran, for the record, I know a lot of people are beating off in the chat. Let me get in my Bronx right now. Okay. No, you should never be physically violent towards children. Ever. Ever. Okay. Not cool. Find another way. Not even black boys. I know the jokes. I know there's a lot of jokes in the chat. Should never beat children, specifically black boys. Okay. No, we're having a good time, but no, never. Okay. I know people gonna be ignorant, play around, but it's really not a joking matter. And I think it's the reason why we have so much dysfunction in our communities. It's really not a laughing matter. And I'm hoping that the people that needed to get something out of this really did, because we need a lot of TLC in our communities. And that's why I wanted to do the show today. And that's why I picked Mr. Chaz. But no, don't ever beat your children. It's just why. Lily Haran.
You got lady.
oh, I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the stream. I came here expecting to learn something and wanting to learn something. Um, And I'm like, oh my God, I'm definitely going to be sending this video out to parents, like every parent I know, especially Black parents. But I learned more than I thought I would learn, and I made some connections, some new connections about my own life. I'm like, oh, okay, I got some processing to do after this show. But I mean, the bottom line is, myself, and Haran talk a lot about, we understand as grown adults who've done work on our own self, that our parents were people. They were men, they were women that had no handbook, who had their own trauma, and all of those things, right? So I have definitely, so I'm not walking around with mommy and daddy issues and mommy, you gave me a spanking and that's why I blah, blah, blah. Did I go through that process? That was a part of my process, the mommy and daddy issues and stuff like that. But he said something in a different way that I say it. I say it in a little bit more rougher way. But I say it's your parents' job to fuck you up, and it is going to be your job eventually to fix yourself up, because they're just humans, and they're going to, even if you have the best parent in the world who's doing the best they can, they're going to make mistakes. It's just that simple. So I really enjoyed this stream. And yes, I know we laugh about this stuff in our community, but there was a lot of great stuff given here. And what I do love is that I was seeing people, aside from the jokes, I saw people in the chat, parents that said that, wow, I'm glad I tuned in today. Wow, I've learned something. I've got a new perspective. So this was a success.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So we are out of here. Yeah. Tune in
I just
tomorrow.
want to I just want to say one something
Go
real
ahead,
quick.
bro. Go ahead.
Hug your children. Hug your children. Some of you need to not get so frazzled when the milk gets spilled.
Yeah.
That be it. A lot of times, a lot of y'all can't handle any kind of snafu.
Mm.
You immediately go off the rails. You immediately think the fucking sky is falling, and it is due to the trauma that you experienced prior. You think that it hasn't affected you, but it has. Me, myself included. I'm still working on a number of things. Some of the things I'm working on will never be fixed. Okay, that's the truth of it. It's just a management issue at this point. It's not about fixing. However, I have acknowledged that as a child, I had a very limited amount of power. But as an adult, I have all the power to say that I won't repeat X, Y, Z. And I think a lot of you need to take that into consideration. When you were under someone's roof, you had a limited amount of power. You did what you had to do. You saw things that you shouldn't have seen, but you don't have to subject your children to the same thing. It's not some sort of rite of passage. And subconsciously, you shouldn't hold on to the idea that, well, I had to go through it, so they should go through it too. Don't do that. And I'll leave it on that.
That's a beautiful note to leave it on, Haran. Because, like I said earlier, please don't forget that children are not you. They are not little mini me's. They are not carbon copies. And don't put your ego on their lives. Like, you better get good grades, or my aunt's gonna say something, or my dad's gonna think something. Those children came through you. They don't belong to you. They're not. You don't own them. Like we were saying earlier, they're not you. And that's something I had to learn. Like, I was a very, very strict mother, and I'm like, but she's not me. She has her own world, her own feelings, her own life, her own brain. She's not me. And I had to learn that, right? Because, like Mr. Chaz says, just be an improvinist, not a perfectionist. This was an amazing panel. Thank you, everyone who contributed. Thank you, chat, for holding me down. I only had to put one person in timeout, because sometimes we got to stay serious on something. Just every now and then, you know what I mean? We fuck off a lot on the blog, but every now and then something is so crucial to our community. Okay. And we can't show our teeth all the time for every subject. So with that said, respectfully, good night. Love you all. No Saint, you were saying?
I just want to say I miss you guys. I can't.
We miss
I'm
you.
having fun.
Oh,
I'm having fun over here. but I do miss it. And I'm so glad I was able to wake up and see you guys on live. I will be flying back Saturday, so I'm not sure if I'll make the Saturday show or not.
Well,
Oh, we miss
respectfully,
you.
Yeah, we miss you too.
wait 1 second. Respectfully, I don't know if I'm ready to say I miss a white man. All right, respectfully.
The women said it. The
I
women
look
said it,
forward to
right?
Right.
seeing you on the show, sir, next time. That's all I got.
Respect,
Ron,
respect.
accept your Stockholm syndrome, please. Okay, like the rest of us.
Much respect. Much respect.
Good
Yeah.
night, folks.
Good night. And
Good
also
night.
shout out to Alfred Ivy for coming up and being religious, but still understanding it's not
Right.
the best thing and improving his parenting. Shout out to Alfred Ivy. You're welcome here anytime. Love you all. Good night. We out of here, man.
Good night.
If you're still here, guys, for any reason, please hit that like and subscribe for Mama if you love this show and you want to support it because it helps keep the church lights on and support other things that we do, including Block Talent Battle. Buy me a smoothie. Cash App on the block with Jen. Thank you so much for being here. We will see you mañana with some more lessons. Hopefully, chat. Thank you so much for participating and holding us down. Good night. Be good. And you can't be good. Be careful. Share this, watch it. If you're catching the replay, go all the way to the beginning. This is life-changing. This one was life-changing. How is it life-changing? Because you could be raising your children a lot better. Okay. All right, guys. And we're out.